Okay, we're up to Daf Samechei Amid Aleph. We're in the middle of a very, very decidistic machlokes between Rabbi Yochanan and Rav. The Mishnah had said that if after the goyrel, one of the animals die, be it the shame or the lazazel, we have to make another goyrel and replace the one that died. That's what the Mishnah said. The one you replace with, and now you have an extra animal. You'll have either two Sirim Lazazel or two Sirim Lashem. Whichever one is extra, you're going to use one, and the other one, the Mishnah says Yeroeh. You're going to go ahead, Rod, and go ahead and we're going to go ahead and let it pasture. We had a machlokes between Rav and Rabbi Yochanan as to which one would it be. According to Rav, you're going to go ahead and use the original. The remainder of the original goyrel will be used, whether it's the Shem or Azazel, and the second one from the second goyrel will be grazing. According to Rabbi Yochanan, the first one is out completely, and you're going to use the whole second pair. We said as far as the machlokes, whether Balei Chayim Nidachim or Ein Nidachim, whether Balei Chayim are Nidachim, Balei Chayim can be going ahead and they're pushed out or not. According to Rav, Balei Chayim is Nidachim, Ein Nidachim. Since Balei Chayim and Nidachim, the first animal from the goyrel is still viable. Since the first animal is still viable, therefore you're going to use that, and the second one will graze. According to Rabbi Yochanan, Balei Chayim Nidachim. So as soon as the first animal from the goyrel died, and you left with one animal, that animal is nidchet, out of the ballpark. Therefore, you must use the second one to fulfill your the shame and lazazel. So now we're up to Samechei Amid Aleph. Samechei Amid Aleph. 2, 4, 6 lines down, 7 lines down. Tetnan. Rabbi Yehuda Omer. Rabbi Yehuda said on Mishnah, Tamus. Now, Rabbi Yehuda argues on the Tanakama, and he says Balei Chayim is Nidachim. He agrees with Rabbi Yochanan, but he disagrees about the halacha of the Chamesh Chata Shemesos. We say that if an animal is used in mechaper and the owner doesn't need it anymore, it dies. But that's only by a carbon yachid. The carbon sibor, it doesn't die. It grazes. Rabbi Yehuda says it doesn't graze. Rabbi Yehuda says it dies. So the havamina of the Gemara is whatever case you hold that's going to graze, Rabbi Yehuda holds it's going to die. So therefore, according to Rav, the second one is grazing, the second one dies. According to Rabbi Yochanan, the second one is used and the first one's grazing. So Rabbi Yehuda holds the first one dies. So now the Gemara has a very interesting kasha on Rav. Okay, let's do it outside. Like Rabbi Yochanan, the first one is going to graze, and you can use the second. So it says Rabbi Yehuda, that first one doesn't graze. That first one, the first goyrel dies. Now you have the second one, and you can use the two of the second one to be Mekayim your mitzvah sayoim of Yom Kippur. One Lazazel and one Lashem. But Loi Rav, it's the second one that's grazing, right? The extra one that's grazing. And you're using the first one. Rav has a problem because Loi Rabbi Yehuda, he holds Balei Chayim Nidachim. If Balei Chayim Nidachim is, you can't use the first one. So Loi Rabbi Yehuda, the Tana Rabbi Yehuda, you can't use the first one because Balei Chayim Nidachim. You can't use the second one because Rav says Yeroeh grazes and therefore Rabbi Yehuda dies. So like Rav, you have no carbon according to Rabbi Yehuda. That's the problem. That's the kasha on Rav. Let's see it inside. Tanan Rabbi Yehuda Omer Tamus. Now again, the havamina is the case where the one that grazes, that's where you die. Rabbi Yochanan, the Amar Sheni Shebesug Rishon Yeroeh. The first one from the second one from the first tree is going to graze. Very good. It dies, and you're left over with the second one to Mekayim the mitzvah of Yom Kippur, right? The Rabbi Yehuda Yamos so mischaper b'sheni shebezuk sheni. You'll be mechaper with the second one of the second pair. You'll use that. El Rav Damar Sheni shebezuk sheni Yeroeh. It's the second one that grazes, and you're going to use the first one. The Rabbi Yehuda Yamos of Yehuda, you're going to let the second one die. Rabbi Yehuda, my mechaper. With Rabbi Yehuda, what are you going to be mechaper? Again, the havamina is the one that grazes is the one that Rabbi Yehuda says dies. So Loi Rav, it's the second one grazing. Rabbi Yehuda says it dies. Rabbi Yehuda's got a problem, but he can't use the first one either because Bali Chaim Nidachim. So how is Rav going to learn Pshat and Rabbi Yehuda? So the Gemara answers, Misabis Rabbi Yehuda Asheni Shebezuk Sheni Koi. Do you think he's going on what? On the one that you say you're going to graze? He's not going on the one that grazes. Rabbi Yehuda Asheni Shebezuk Rishon Koi. He's going on the one in the first one. That's all. All he says is the following: if your blood spills, the other one dies. That's it. The one from the first pair it dies, but the second one you're going to graze. That second one is not a problem. He's not saying anything about grazing. He's not saying anything about grazing. He's saying, so like Rabbi Yehuda, you'll be mechaper with the second one. In other words, he also like Rabbi Yochanan. We said yesterday, Rav doesn't come out according to Rabbi Yehuda, but Rav can learn Pshat in Rabbi Yehuda, right? You ask how Rabbi Yehuda, according to me, is going to go ahead and have an animal. He does have an animal. The first one grazes, right? And right, the first one is he's not going on the first one, he's going on the second one. That the one that grazes, I hold dies, that's the first one, and the second one from the second pair, you'll get your kapara from that. So that's the way Rav will answer up the Taina on Rabbi Yehuda. Now going back to yesterday's Amid, go back to Samachei Amid days, 2, 4, 6, 8, 9, 10 lines down. Tanan v'oid Amar Rabbi Yehuda. In addition, Rabbi Yehuda said the following. Right? What did he say? Nishbach hadam yamas mishaleach. If the dam spills, the animal dies. Mesa mishaleach, the animal dies. Yishbach hadam, because bali chaim nidachim, and even the blood is nitcha. Now bishleim Rabbi Yochanan bali chaim nidachim mishamachi yamas. That's why mishaleach dies. You can't use it. El Rav dama bali chaim ein nidachim my yamas mishaleach. So Rav answers, I can't come out according to Rabbi Yehuda. So this was a question on what? On Rav. We have another lashon that this was a question on Rabbi Yochanan. That's what we're going to say right now. Another pshat that this was a question on Rabbi Yochanan. Okay, so now there are those who ask on Rabbi Yochanan, not Rav. For oid Amar Rabbi Yehuda, nishbach hadam, if the dam spills, yamas hamishtalech, the animal dies. Mesa mishtaleach, the animal dies. Yishbach hadam, you split the blood. Now bishlei mila Rav. Very good, according to Rav. Reisha pligi bechatas tzibor, the seifa pligi mebalei chayim. In other words, when it says that if the you hold in a scenario where the baal is mischaper, that you get a kapara with the sheni, he says that's not true. He says that he makes no distinction between a chatas tzibur and a chatas yachid. Take a look at Samach Beis Amid Aleph, Eshi. Samach Beis Amid Aleph. At the end of the Mishnah, Vasheni Yiroad Sheyistaev. The second one, you go ahead. According to Rav, it's the second one of the second pair. According to Rabbi Yochanan, it's the second one of the first pair. V'yimacha v'yiplu, and you go ahead, you sell it, and you go ahead, you sell it for. And use the money in a dava. Shein chatas tzibur mesa. The chatas of a tzibur doesn't die, and Rabbi Yehuda argues in that. Rabbi Yehuda Matamas, it does die. So the first thing he's arguing on is the fact that it's the chatas at tzibur. For oidam Rabbi Yehuda, in addition, Rabbi Yehuda says nishbach hadam yamas mishaleach because bali chaim nidachim. So according to Rav, it's very good. He's arguing in two venues. He's arguing with chatas at tzibur, and he's arguing about whether bali chaim is nidachim. But according to Rabbi Yochanan also is Bali Chaim Nidachim. So what is the Va'oid? There's only one Machlokes. Says the Gemara inside, right before the two dots bar. Bishleim Rav Reisha Polig Bechatas Tzibor. We say Chatas Tzibor, that what is Yeroeh. I say it as the same halach from Sinai as Chatas Yochid. The Seifa Pligi B'Balei Chayim. And the Seifa is arguing about Balei Chayim. You say Rav. The first, you bring the first one from the second one from the first pair, because Bali Chaim any Nidachim, I hold Bali Chaim Nidachim. El Rabbi Yochanan, my Va'oid. Like Rabbi Yochanan, there's no Va'oid. Rabbi Yochanan also, they only say one thing. They say Bali Chaim is Nidachim. Where it says Kasha Nachanami, it's a Kasha on Rabbi Yochanan. That's the way the Gemara ends up. Okay. Now the Gemara is going to analyze Rabbi Yehuda. Again, Rabbi Yehuda hold Bali Chaim Nidachim. if the mishaleach dies and you have blood of the par, you spill out the par blood. If the par blood spills out, then the mishaleach dies. Okay, that's what he held. Very good. If the dam spills, yamas mishaleach dies. You didn't do the mitzvah yet. The mitzvah of what is to sprinkle the blood, and if the blood spritz, you can't sprinkle the blood. That's why it dies. Why are you spilling out the blood? You did the mitzvah what of the seir. Now you would think, if I would ask you what's the mitzvah of the seir lazazel, you would say you do vidoy on it, you send it to the midbar, and you throw it off a cliff. And you'd be incorrect, because we saw in Daf Mem in the Masechta that the vidoy is not ma'akiv. The vidoy on the seir is not ma'akiv. Again, the chayk that it says that is ma'akiv is only A, on the kohen gadol, and B, only when the kohen gadol is wearing this big day love on. Over here, the mitzvah is no mitzvah kohen gadol. As a matter of fact, it's an ish iti. It's another person who goes and takes it out to the midbar. So it's the whole mitzvah of the seir that's done the big day love on is the actual gairal, which you did already. So Fred the Gemara, if Mesa Mishtaleach, why are you spilling the blood? You did the mitzvah already of Mishtaleach. You went ahead and did the gairal. That's where it says chayk, and that's where it says big day love on the gairal. So why are you going ahead and spilling out the blood? You should be able to go ahead and use the blood. That's why Fred the Gemara. It's a great kasha, guys. Again, in our minds, we think the mitzvah is the completion of it. It's not ma'akiv. It's not ma'akiv. Neither the vidui nor the shluach le'azazel is not ma'akiv. The gairal is ma'akiv. And you did the gairal already. That's how you got two animals. So Fred the Gemara, why are you spilling out the blood if the Mishalech died? Lass it bleiben starben. Let it be tight. Let it be dead. We don't care. You shouldn't spill out the blood. The blood is viable. It's not nidachim, according to Rabbi Yehuda. Says the Gemara, Fred the Gemara kasha. Very good if the dam spills, the mishleach dies. The akati lo yisavid mitzvah say, you didn't do the mitzvah of the dam yet, the zrika, so therefore, of course, you have to bring a new one. You did the mitzvah of the goyrol. And then again, what's the key? Big day love and kohen gadol, and you did that already. So Ami the Rabbi Yanai, Amakrod is a side point over here. Nothing to do, it's a side point, but it's nothing to do with the big day love. Listen to the side point. It says, Yomod Chai Lefnei Hashem Lechaper, that the animal, La'azazel, has to stand alive, Lechaper. What does that mean? Ad Mata Yezokik Liyois Chai. How long does it have to remain alive? At Shas Matan Dom Shel Chaveroi, till you do what? The Zrika of the par. So Be'emes, you did the halacha of the Gairol. You did it. But guess what? There's a Zaitika halacha. It's got to stay alive until you do this rika. If nishbach adam, you can't do this rika. Mamela, you have to do a new gairol. Not because of the semish talech, but because there's a legal point. Not the chayk, not the big day lavan, but there's a gezeres hakasiv. This animal must remain alive, even though you did the mitzvah on it already. This animal has to remain alive till you do the zrikas adam. If nishbach adam, if it's spilled, you can't do this rika. If I can't do this rika, mamela, I have to go ahead and make a new gairol to bring a new ser lazazel. Okay, Sanan Hassan. Now we're going to a new sugya. Let's go back to Shkolim, our Shkolim days. Remember, on Erev, on Rosh Chodesh Adar, they would go ahead and they would send out for Shkolim. They would collect the Shkolim. They bring them to the Beis Hamikdash, and on Rosh Chodesh Nisan, they would start bringing karbanos from the new funds that were collected. That we said in addition, they would go ahead and be tired for the money that arrived, and even the money that will arrive, and even the money that did arrive. Question, at which point in time does it become, it belongs to the Beis HaMikdash, or it's still in the hands of the owner, right? So that point is when you do Trumas Halishka, when you go ahead and take out the first separation for funds. As soon as you take out the first separation of funds, not only does it, you're collecting for the funds that are there, but the funds that will arrive. The mela that will arrive is already considered in the Rishus of Hegdish. So says the Gemara, we had a Mishnah in Shkolim. Tan Hasa. B'nei O'ir, shesholchu eshekleihem, people of a city, they sent their Shkolim, v'nignevu, and they were stolen. Oisha avdu, or they were lost. And this Galachai was a Shemechina. Im nisrama truma, if the truma was done already in the Beis Hamikdash, and therefore the money that was coming in belonged to Hegdish, so who did these Shoimrim have to swear to? Nishbayim leGizbarim. They swear to the Gizbar of Hegdish, who's the Baal. Again, the mitzvah daraisa Shvuas HaShoimrim is to the Baal. If the Baal over here is Hegdish, because why? Because they were Nitman, they did the Truma already. The Im Lav, if they did do the Truma yet, they didn't do the Truma yet. In other words, they're just schlepping it up. It's still in the hands of the people who sent them. Then Nishboyin Lebnei Ha'ir, and they swear to the people of the city. And now the people of the city, Ubnei Ha'ir, Shoiklin Acherim Tachteim. They have to go ahead and replace them. Good. That was the din's clear cut. Din Nimsu. If you find the money that was lost, this is going on Shavdu. Oisher Zirum Haganovim. This is going on Sheganvu. They returned it. So now you have two shkolim. You have the original shkolim that was sent and now are there, and the new one that they went ahead and separated. So Elu ve'elu shkolim heim. They both have halacha shkolim. Vein oilim lehen l'shana haba. You can't go ahead and use it for the next year, right? You can't use it for the next year. Rabbi Yehuda no oilim l'shana haba. Rabbi Yehuda says you could use it for the next year. So again, l'chayra, this money could be used for the next year. We're going to lead up to a question about why does Rabbi Yehuda have to hold the animal die? Why can't we use the animal for next year? That's the segue over here, guys. Good. My time with Rabbi Yehuda. What's the reason Rabbi Yehuda? So Amarava, Kasav Rabbi Yehuda, Chayve shel shana zu, Krevis l'shana haba. A chayv of this year of shkalim, they could be brought next year. So l'chayra, this halacha of a chayv of this year can be, but next year, the Gemara wants to extend from shkalim to karbonis. Just like shkalim of this year, chayv can carry over to the next year. Hu adin, a carbon of the tzibur this year can carry over to next year. That's what the Gemara's Havamina is. Esive abaya par v'sar shel Kippurim, the par and the sar of Yom Kippur. Just keep in mind, the par was bought from Aaron's own personal funds. We saw par v'sar shel Kippurim sha'avdu that were lost v'hifish acherim tachteim, and you separate others and you brought the others. So now I don't need this par anymore. Now I don't need the seir anymore. If the tzibur acts upon a sack of avodah zara, they have to bring a par as an oila and a seir as the chatas. Sha'avdu v'hifishach, also chatas tzibur, right? Sha'avdu v'hifishachim tachteyim. They were lost, and you separated others in their place, and consequently the others were brought as kabbanis, so you don't need them anymore. Kulan yamusu. They all die. Rabbi Yehuda. This is Rabbi Yehuda. And guys, this is Rabbi Yehuda l'shitasai. This is one of the five chatas sibur as five chatas shemesais. Allah l'mashmi Sinai. This is chatas shekipra ba'aleha. So you don't need it anymore. And Rabbi Yehuda said there's no distinction between carbon yachid or carbon sibur. In both cases, it's going to die. So over here as well, despite the fact that it's a carbon tzibur, Rabbi Yehuda says the halacha Moshe Sinai states chata shekipra ba'aleha afilu chatas at tzibur will die. Rabbi Lazar of Shimon Aimrim yirau ad sheyistavu, let them pasture till they get a mum. V'yimachru, sell them. V'yiplu demeim l'nedava. Why shein chatas tzibur mesa? So that ain't the chatas tzibur mesa. So now, what's the kasha? The kasha is, look at the last Rashi on the page. Kulan yamusu. So question, in the Havamina, as I explained according to the Ritva, there's no distinction between shkalim left over for next year and karbanis tzibur left over for next year. So why in the world does Rabbi Yehuda say they should die? Just use next year. Let's keep it simple. Let's use the seir or the par of Yom Kippur for next year. Why are you letting it die? Let it come and use it for next Yom Kippur. That's the Gemara's kasha. And we're going to have a few terutzim, and we're going to leave this terutzim because it extends to the next Amid even, the terutzim. So let's get the question straight again, one more time. Rabbi Yehuda says, Le'in shkalim, that any extra shkalim that you have as a result of being separated when you don't need them anymore, and they're both over here, you don't need it anymore, you leave it over for the next year. So hu adin, the same thing of a carbon that I don't need anymore. I don't need anymore. Why? Because you bought one already. The par was bought of Yom Kippur, you bought. The Seir Yom Kippur was bought. You don't need it anymore. So go ahead. It says, Yehuda Yamusu. Fred the Gemara, why Yamusu? If Rabbi Yehuda holds that it can be extended to next year by coins, let it go ahead and be extended next year for the carbon. So Amalei, so Rabbi told Abaya Amid Beis, Rabbi told Abaya, Karbonis Tzibur Kamrit. You want to know why Karbonis Tzibur? That why you can't hold them over for next year? I'll tell you why. Shiny Karbonis Tzibur, Kid Rav Tavi Amar Rav Yeshia. Like Rav Tavi says in the name of Yeshia, it's different. The Amar Rav Tavi, Amar Rav Yeshia, Amakra, the pasuk says, Zois Oiles Chodesh B'Chadshay. This is the Oiles Chodesh B'Chadshay. Amar Torah, the word Chodesh, we're going to play on words. Amar Torah Chadesh. Go ahead and bring mechadash, bring from new funds. The heavy law carbon mitrumas hachadasha, and bring the carbon what from a trumas chadasha. That's where it has to come from. So now, says Rashi, Chodesh b'chadshay, l'chadshay chidushim yisera ksiv, l'drasha, that Chodesh is extra. Loi malacha, yesh Chodesh, she'at tzarech l'chadesh hakabanis. There's a Chodesh that you have to mechadesh to kabanis, u'le'eviyah mitrumas chadasha, and bring it from the new funds. V'gomar shana shama min Nisan, the chsiv rishon lechem, right, is the Chodesh rishon is, what is Nisan? So therefore, the reason why it doesn't carry over is because the Gezeres HaKosiv, you have to bring from the new funds. Masha'enke in the Shkolim, which was stolen, right? So we know that what they were in the Shus of the Bailam, they didn't belong to Hegdish, and Memela, you can bring them for next year. That's the svara of the distinction between the coins and the carbon. By the coins, if they were stolen and they were found, they were still in the Rishus of what? Of the Baal, so Memela, it can carry over to next year. It wasn't in the Rishus Hegdish yet. Mashenkin over here, where it's Rishus of Hegdish, the carbon was in the Skadish already, it was used for Yom Kippur, it was supposed to be used for Yom Kippur, Memela can't go over for next year because I need funds for a new carbon. Now, this works well for what? For a chatas tzibur. What about a chatas that's purchased with your own money? Says the Gemara. Hatenach seir. Good. You stated unequivocally why this seir can't be bought from old one, because you have to bring it from new funds. But par ma'yikla neymar. What are you going to say by par? Par was bought by Aaron, his money, and l'chayra, that's not subject to what? To the shkolim that he used his own money to buy. So l'chayra, why do we say that par you could use the next year? Why yamusu? Why does it have to die? Again, it's personal funds. Why does it have to die? The par should be considered like a personal carbon. So Michael Neymar says, "Mar gezerah par otuseir." Make a gezerah par otuseir. Just if we let the par live, we might let the seir live. And since it's chatash shekipur ba'aleha, we can't let it live. Just because the gezerah the rabbanon, you're going to let it die? Just let it yirah. Let it go ahead and let it go ahead and graze. Why are you killing it? Why are you starving it to death? Again, I understand the seir you can't use, and I understand you will hold that the halacha Moshe Sinai says it's chatas that dies. Very good. But by the par, that doesn't, again, you hold that chayvis could be used for the next year, as we see by shkolim. So by kabbanis you should also, so you're telling me by kabbanis there's a halacha, I can't use something that's off from old funds. For the Gemara, the par didn't come from old funds, the par came from personal funds. So why you musa? Why are you letting it die? Why are you letting it die? Now, there's a big kasha over here, guys. I'll tell you why you're letting it die. It's Allah Chamash Misina. What's the Gemara's kasha? What's the Gemara asking whether you let it die or not? Allah Chamash Misina says you let it die. So the Riffa speaks out, when do you let it die is only if there's not a workaround. It's not nothing you can do. Where there's something you can do, then you don't let it die. So here's something you can do. Go ahead and bring it next year. Good. Usually when you let it die, there's no option. There's a single guy. He only brings the carbon once. If he dies, you don't say, well, 1 second, let me look for somebody else. Kipru ba'aleha. He was B'chal Shabbos b'shoigeg. We don't say, oh, don't worry, he'll do it again. We'll keep it around for him. You don't say that. Masha'en Ken Yom Kippur, which you know for sure is going to come next year. And so therefore, you do have a workaround. Therefore, while we're going to say, maybe the Lachal Mashina doesn't apply over there. Again, that's a kasha that's unstated, but you have to ask the kasha, or else the Gemara doesn't begin. Fred the Gemara, why did they die? Since you can keep it for next year by the coins. I'll tell you why they died. Rabbi Yehuda says there's no difference between chatas yachid and a chatas tzibor. The halacha l'Moshe Sinai says chatas shekipra ba'aleha dies. What's the kamash kasha? And for the Gemara, the kasha is when does it die? When there's no other option. When there's another option, I don't say the halacha l'Moshe Sinai. You got that? It's very important. Okay, so Geshmak. So Fred the Gemara, great kasha now. You're telling me the reason that what? The reason why you can't use it is because that's come from the new funds. That's great by the sayer. The par doesn't have to come from new funds. It comes from personal funds. So why you musu? Let it graze. You can say, Gezeru atu sayer, let it graze. So this teretz doesn't hold up. But in addition, you want to say this goes according to Rav Tavi in the name of Yoshia. I got a big problem with that. Hadar Rav Tavi, Amar Rav Yoshia, gufa mitzvahi. It's a mitzvah to bring from the new funds. But it doesn't mean if you bring from the old funds, it's not a good carbon. It's a mitzvah to bring from the new coins. But if you bring from last year's coins, yatsa, you would be yatsa. Ella shechasa mitzvah, you're missing a mitzvah. So if this whole reason you're telling me, the reason why you can't use a seir from last year, the reason why you can't go ahead, the reason why you can't use a seir from last year, you're telling me the reason why you can't use a seir from last year is because of you need to bring from the new funds. I agree, you have to bring from the new funds, but that's a mitzvah to bring from new funds. It's not ma'akiv if you don't. It's not ma'akiv if you don't. So that would not be a good reason to say why you can't bring from, keep the korbanos alive and bring it for next year. Okay, guys, let's chaz riba, okay? Guys, chaz riba. Here's the kasha. Guys, look at me. You have Rabbi Yehuda. Says Rabbi Yehuda, if I send my shkalim and they're stolen before the trumas halishka, and then they're found, and I separated the second pair, they're both kodesh. Says Rabbi Yehuda, the second one, you could use it for next year. Fred the Gemara, if he holds you can use the second one for next year, why doesn't he hold you can use the animals for next year? Right? Why do they have to die? We're asking a kasha, halacha mashmi Sinai, who's saying that halacha mashmi Sinai is no other option. If there's another option, we should let it live. Fred the Gemara, I'll tell you what. I'll tell you why. You need to bring it from new funds. And for the Gemara, two new funds would answer why I can't use the goat. It wouldn't answer up why I can't use the par. The par is bought from Aaron's funds. So the Gemara, well, the par is a gezeru atuat atuseya. Fred the Gemara, if it's a gezeru, why are you letting it die? Just go ahead and pasteurize it. Right? Let it pasture. Secondly, that you have to use funds is only la mitzvah. It's not la akev. So we could let it live, despite the fact that it was bought with new old funds, and still bring it next year. So I was afraid the Gemara. So right now, back to the original question. If Rabbi Yehuda says you can use shkalim for the next year, why doesn't Rabbi Yehuda say, let the seir and the par of Yom Kippur live and we'll use it next year? Back to the original question, we need another teretz. Ella dead end, new teretz. Ella Amar Rav Zera lefi she'ena goyrel koiveya mishon l'chaveirasa. Guess what? The goyrel has to be what? Once a year. You can't, what are you going to say? The seir and the par that went through a goyrel last year, I'm going to use it for the next year. The goyrel can't be kaveya for the next year. The goyrel has to be for now. The goyrel has to be for now. Frag the Gemara, v'nigrol, so make another goyrel. Go ahead, go put him through the goyrel. Says the Gemara, gezer shem yomru hagoyrel kaveya mishon chaverta. They'll go ahead and say that the goyrel is kaveya for the next year. Says the Gemara, hatenach seir, because that has a goyrel. Par ma'ikol meimar. There's no goyrel by the par. Says the Gemara, para to seir. You have gezeru the para to the seir, the same teretz. Fred the Gemara, same kashim gezeru yomus. So just because of gezeru, we can let him die. Go ahead and just let it pasture. Amru Gemara kamei dabaya. They said this in front of Rabbi. Gezeru mishum chata shemesa ba'aleha. It's a gezeru word of chata smat mesa ba'aleh. The reason why you can't use it next year is maybe the kohen gadol is going to die. Maybe he'll die. So therefore, in the chashash that maybe the kohen gadol over the year will die, and he has the par, he owns the par, right? Therefore, we can't go ahead and use the par. Why can't you use the seir? And the Gemara now the opposite. Gezer is seira atu par. We're going to the seira atu the par. Until now, we've been going to the par atu the seir. Now we've been going to the seir atu the par. Fred Gemara mishum gezera yemusu. Just because of gezera, you're going to let it die. Again, the same thing. Let it pasture. Ella, what are you going to say? Gezeru mishum chata she'ava shenasa. Oh, guys, one of the 5 chata shemesais is what? Is chata she'ava shenasa. It's more than a year old. When was this animal separated? For Yom Kippur. The animal was separated for Yom Kippur. Yeah. What are we worried about? Gezerah, maybe next Yom Kippur, you guys, maybe you'll use it for a chatas that was what? More than a year old. Now, what do you mean you're going to be guys more than a year old? If it's next Yom Kippur, it is more than a year old. It's at least a year and 8 days old, right? In other words, Fred the Gemara, if that's what you're worried about, it's not a gezerah. It is more than a year old. In other words, the reason I can't use it is because it's out of bounds. It's gone. It's over a year old. Says the Gemara. Gezerahi gufa chata shava shenasahi. It's for sure more than a year old. So what do you mean it's gezerah? Says the Gemara like kasha. Nah, it's not a problem. Kerebi, the Tanya. We go ahead and we're going to ascertain Yom Kippur based upon the lunar or the solar calendar, guys. The lunar calendar, right? 354. Guess what? The year of an animal is calculated according to the solar calendar. So I have 11 days to play with. So it's possible that what? Well, we only have 3 days to play with, right? Because it had to be what? 8 days old. It's only it's got to be only a three-day difference. Says Gemara. The Tanya, Shana Tmima Moina Sholesh Meas V'Shisha Chamisha Yoim. Kinyim Meisachama. Divrei Rabbi. You go ahead and you count when? You count from 365 days. You count 12 months from day to day, 12 months from day to day, if it's a regular year, in this Abra, and if it's a Ibiyar, this Abra L'Meicher, the extra month goes to the seller. Okay.
Yeah, but I still don't understand why you have it for one Yom Kippur. How do you bring it to the next one?
Why not? I'm holding that Rabbi Yehuda
For that 1 year.
Again, just like Rabbi Yehuda holds, you can bring money from year to year. You can bring a carbon from year to year. So I have it around from last Yom Kippur. I'll bring it this Yom Kippur. What's the problem, Heshi? You have to give me a problem. What's the problem?
I thought it's designated for that Yom Kippur.
But it was designated for Yom Kippur.
Okay. So
again, it's designated for Yom Kippur. It was now. If you want to tell me it's more than a year old, so it's out of bounds, I have a workaround, right? That's 354. This is 365, right? And 8 days, so it's going to be what? It's going to be 3 days. But I'm saying that's but now this is speaking the Indian about the Batei Arichoima. You know, Batei Arichoima, guys, you lose it after a year. You have to redeem it. You can't redeem it till the year is up. Look at Rashi. Cholei kasha on the Amid base. Mishkachas lo avashinasa karebi. The Amar eina shana shlema miyam kippur miyam kippur. It's not a full year from Yom Kippur to Yom Kippur. We count from the lunar year. And the solar year is 11 days more. You have to give that extra 11 days. The Tanya, you can't redeem it until what? It's a year old. You can't redeem a Bati Arichayma until it's in the Rishus Lekeach for a year. So now, is it a lunar year or is it a solar year? So Rabbi says it's a lunar year, it's a solar year, and the Chacham say it's 12 months, and it could even be longer. Why? Because you'll get what if it's an Ibiyar, it goes l'meicher, it goes to the seller, and it won't go ahead. It won't. Rashi says like tichlot achyagia b'isa yoyim b'isa chaydesh. So the one who machar, the one who the meicher is the seller, right? So he would. Like Tichlat, Rashi says, and it won't be until what? Until the time that he sold it exactly. So therefore, it would be very good. It would be very good shmak. The gezerah is that it's going to be more than a year old. How can it be more than a year old? Says it'll be 365 versus 354. Says what are you going to say by the par? But that works well by the seir. What are you going to say by the par? In other words, the par is 3 years old, guys, right? Guys, what do you say by the par? The par is 3 years old. The sayer is a year old, the par is a 3-year-old, or else it's not a par, right? It's an egel if it's less. So it's a par. Michael and Meimar. So the Gemara gives the same teretz, Gezerah para to sayer, for the Gemara Mishum Gezerah Yomus, okay? For oid chatas shava shenasa l'ri'ah azla. A chatas that the year passes by goes to get grazed. Damrei shlakish chatas shava shenasa, roina like ilahi I made this basic forest, we do this basic forest for roya. So it's still holding by a kasha, right? We didn't answer it yet. Like Rabbi Yehuda, who holds that money goes to the next year, why in fact can we have what? Animals of the sayer and the par to go to the next year. Bez Hashem will continue here tomorrow.